By late 1941, the Soviet military was collapsing under the weight of Operation Barbarossa. The German invasion had decimated the Red Army, leaving the front lines critically short on manpower and the nation desperate for a lifeline. Into that void stepped Marina Ruskova. A famous Soviet aviatrix with multiple distance records, she leveraged her immense popularity to petition Joseph Stalin directly. Her request was simple: let women fight. When Stalin approved the order, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of young women volunteered. They filled every position required, from mechanics and navigators to the pilots themselves. Sheer desperation forced a reluctant military to accept women on the front lines. This unit existed because the Soviet brass were running out of men. The military issued them the Polikarpov P-02, a painfully slow 1928 crop duster with an open-air cockpit. Looking closely, its wings are entirely wood and stretched canvas. A single tracer bullet would turn it into a fireball. Because the planes were so fragile and engines so weak, strict weight limits dictated every mission. The crews flew without radios, without any radar, and, most terrifyingly, without parachutes. Back on the ground, the military infrastructure was just as hostile. The women were issued discarded men's uniforms and boots so massively oversized they had to stuff their bedding into the toes just to walk. Their male peers gave them no respect, zero gear, and assigned them to fly wooden coffins. The expectation across the military establishment was that they would fail completely. Every evening, as the sun sat over the freezing Russian steppe, the crews prepared to launch. They would take off into the pitch-black winter sky, entirely exposed to the elements. Up in the air, the physical limitations of the P-02 became glaringly obvious. The biplane maxed out at about 60 miles per hour fully loaded, while the German fighters hunting them could easily top 300 miles per hour. This chart compares the top speed of the Po-2 against the stall speed of the primary German fighter, the Messerschmitt Bf 109. Stall speed is the absolute minimum velocity an aircraft needs to maintain flight. Because the German fighter's minimum stall speed was actually faster than the biplane's maximum speed, they couldn't slow down enough to get a clean shot. If a German pilot matched the Po-2's case, his plane would lose lift and drop out of the sky. To exploit this, the Soviet crews developed a highly specific attack sequence. Approaching the target, the navigator would tap the pilot on the shoulder. The pilot would then completely cut the engine and let the wooden plane glide silently through the darkness toward the German lines. Without engine noise, the only warning the soldiers below had was the eerie sound of the wind rushing through the canvas and wire struts. To the terrified Germans on the ground, the whistling noise sounded exactly like a witch's broom. The unit actively weaponized their plane's greatest weaknesses, its slowness and lack of armor, into an asymmetrical, terrifying tactical advantage. Once they dropped their bombs, the element of surprise vanished. The dark sky would instantly light up with blinding searchlights and heavy anti-aircraft fire, forcing the unarmored planes to dive and weave wildly to survive. All of this evasion had to be done entirely manually. To find their way back, the navigators relied on a basic compass, simple map pencils, and handheld stopwatches to calculate distance. The brutal cold created its own hazards. Freezing temperatures frequently jammed the release mechanisms. When a bomb stuck, the navigator had to unbuckle, climb out onto the frozen wing mid-flight, and physically shove the bomb free. If a crew survived the run, they glided back to a makeshift dirt runway lit only by handheld torches. Mechanics would swarm the plane, rapidly refueling the tank and strapping on fresh bombs before immediately launching the aircraft right back into the air. Because the planes could only carry 2 lightweight bombs at a time, volume was their only metric for success. A single 2-woman crew would repeat this grueling, terrifying loop up to 18 times between sunset and sunrise. The constant, cyclical pressure of these sorties shattered the German ranks. Each flight inflicted severe sleep deprivation and broke the psychological endurance of the frontline troops. This timeline tracks the unit's output throughout the war. By 1945, the 588th Regiment had executed over 23,000 successful combat sorties and dropped an astonishing 3,000 tons of bombs. The German High Command grew to fear them so deeply that any Nazi airman who managed to shoot down a night witch was automatically awarded the prestigious Iron Cross. On the Soviet side, their combat records spoke for themselves. 23 women from the regiment were awarded the absolute highest distinction their country could bestow, the Hero of the Soviet Union. Yet, the moment the war ended, the Soviet government moved to erase them. The 588th was disbanded within 6 months, and the veteran pilots were quietly instructed to stop flying, go home, and resume traditional civilian lives. During the massive victory parade in Moscow, as soldiers marched through Red Square dragging captured Nazi banners, the night witches were conspicuously absent. The official excuse given for barring them from the celebration was that their wooden planes were simply too slow to participate. Relentless endurance in the face of inferior equipment and systemic hostility defined the unit's success. These women cemented their legacy as the 8th most decorated unit in history.